All right, so we've looked at solving one-step equations. Now we are up to two-step equations. And the key thing you need to remember when you're solving a two-step equations is that we are going to follow reverse order of operations. Okay, so we're following reverse order of operations. And as we do that, we're going to keep using those same inverse operations that we used when we were doing one-step equations. Now, what are we talking about, this reverse order of operations? So this table here, this is what we talked about order of operations before, right? You do your grouping symbols, then your exponents, then any multiplication or division, then any subtraction or addition, right? Well, now what we're going to do when you're undoing an equation is we're going to start down at the bottom and work our way up. So you undo the adding or subtracting first, then undo the multiplying or dividing, then undo the exponents, and then undo the grouping symbols. Okay, and the reason why we do that is that if you want to undo something, you always have to do backwards of what you did before, right? Think about it. If the last thing you did with your car was you took a left into your driveway, when you pull out of your driveway to go back the way you came, you're going to have to take a right. Okay, so you're going to do everything backwards and you're doing it in the opposite order. Okay, so that's kind of what we're talking about here. So when we look at these equations, this guy down here, I'm still going to be really careful about where my equal sign is. The first thing that I'm going to undo is any addition or subtracting. So I've got to subtract 2 here. So that's the first thing I'm going to undo. So I will add 2 on both sides of my equation. These will cancel each other out, which leaves me with just this 3x here that we haven't done anything with yet. So I'm going to copy that down. Here's my equal sign. And then negative 6 plus 2, so 6 fires, 2 buckets of water. That means I'm going to have 4 fires left over. Okay, and then my next step, after I've undone the subtracting or addition, now I'm going to undo any multiplying or dividing. Well, that's 3 times x, so I'm going to undo it by dividing. Okay, so those will cancel. I'm be left with just an x equals. And then over here, well, negative 4 doesn't divide by 3. Normally, if you get a fraction answer, I'd be suspicious that maybe you did something wrong. But in this case, we didn't do anything wrong. It's just a fraction answer. So I'm going to write my answer as negative 4/3. And that's it. All right, so we got one done. Now let's take a look at this guy over here. So again, the first thing that we're going to undo is any subtraction or addition. I've got a plus 4 in this equation, so I'm going to subtract 4 on both sides, get those to cancel. So I'll have this x over negative 2 left. There's my equal sign. And then negative 1 minus 4, so that's like negative 1 plus negative 4. 1 fire and 4 more fires, that's 5 fires. Okay, and now I want to undo any multiplication or division. This is division. So to undo it, I'm going to multiply both sides by negative 2. Those cancel. I'm left with just x. And then over here, don't forget our multiplication division bear, right? So if I'm multiplying negative 5 times negative 2, 5 times 2 is 10, and a negative times a negative is a positive. So my answer is just 10. All right, moving on to this guy. All right, now this guy is a little bit weird because unlike these ones, the x was in the front, and here it's not in the front. And that throws people off sometimes when you see them where the x isn't the first thing. But it's okay, we're still going to follow the same steps. Here's the part that's going to be a little bit different. Normally, we would say, okay, well, I want to undo any adding or subtracting first, and you would think that you'd have to undo this part. But it's actually this number right here that we're going to get rid of first. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is this is a positive 3, right? So if I want to get rid of it, I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. So notice that even though there's a minus sign here, remember that minus sign stays with the x, right? The sign always stays with the thing that it's in front of. So this guy, it matters what sign is in front. It's a positive 3. So I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. Those will cancel. Don't get rid of that minus sign. That minus sign has to stay with the x, right? And then 4 minus 3 is 1. Okay, now you might be looking at this and saying, well, what is going on with that negative? Well, remember, if there's no number written in front of a variable, there's an invisible number 1 that's written there. So that is like -1 times x. So if I want to solve this, I'm going to divide by -1 to make that cancel. So I'm going to have x equals 1 divided by 1 is 1. And if I have a positive and a negative, my answer is negative. So -1 is my answer. All right, great. Last one. So this guy over here. So again, it sort of looks like it's backwards where you've got the 3x. Usually it's in front. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually start by getting rid of this guy. This is a +7. So my first thing I'm going to do is subtract 7 from both sides. So that'll cancel. I'm left with 3x. 4 and -7, when I combine those together, 4 buckets of water, 7 fires. So think about that for a second. 4 buckets of water, 7 fires. I'm going to put out a bunch of fires. How many fires are going to be left? 3. So I'm going to have 3 fires left over. And then this, that's multiplication. So I'm going to divide both sides by 3. So x is going to be -1. And that's my answer. Now, here's something else that you could do if this makes it easier for you. I know that having this number in front and getting rid of it that way can be really confusing for some people. So here's an alternate option. Another thing that you could have done is you could rewrite this and just swap the order that those two things are in. You got to make sure you keep the sign in front of it still in front. So this negative sign would have to stay in front of the x. And that 3, because it's a +3, would become a +3. Okay? And then from there, you could solve that like normal. So I basically just swapped these two guys. Same thing over here. We could have also done that here. We could have swapped these two. That's a +3x, a +3x. So I could have written that in front. And then since that's a +7, wrote +7 equals 4. And then solve that equation. That is the same thing. You just have to make sure that you keep the signs in front of whatever they're already in front of. So notice how here the minus sign was in the middle and it's not in the middle anymore, right? It stays in front of the x. Okay, so you could do that either way. If it's easier for you to rewrite it and then solve it, that is totally cool. You are welcome to do that.